Hey everyone, my name is Hamza. I work as a research science manager at Google. Just a fancy word for saying I run a few ML models here and there. And the work I do goes from ML models to all the way to SOTA AI, LLM models. We help build models that can predict user abuse, and the realm and then the group that I work in is the trust and safety within search. I want to take a minute for everyone to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Batul. Batul, would love to hear a little bit about you, about your background.
Hello, everybody. So this is Batul. I served as an applied scientist for Amazon AI for about 4.5 years, where I focused on dialogue machines and natural language understanding and chatbots, everything to do with chatbots. Before that, I was a data scientist for a major insurance company. And prior to that, I was a researcher at Stanford University. So last year, so as to celebrate my 10th career/work anniversary, I decided to take an year off and go on a mini world tour. And during that era, so many things happened, like ChatGPT came up and Midjourney literally blew everything out of water. So despite having spent like 10 years as a researcher in AI, I already feel like I've been living under the cave. So quite a bit of catching that I had to do, but I think it's super exciting times in AI research. So, and thank you so much for having me here.
Francesca, love to know about you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Francesca Lazzari. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts. I work as a principal data scientist manager at Microsoft. So that means that I lead a few teams of data scientists and machine learning scientists as well. And right now we work on a few internal problems at Microsoft. So our customers are all internal customers, and we use a set of different technologies, open source, mainly open source technology, in order to build these end-to-end applications. I've been now in this industry for more than a decade. I started my journey in data science, machine learning when I was doing my PhD, first in Italy, then I moved to the United States. I always been in the Boston area. And at the beginning of my career, I was actually working as an individual contributor, as a data scientist. I was working with different algorithms to actually working with external customer data. That was fun because, as you can imagine, the quality and the variety and diversity of that data was very, very interesting. And I was still working as a machine learning scientist, data scientist, to build end-to-end solutions on the cloud. This is me. So thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Raja, we'll give you 30 seconds to reintroduce yourself today.
So my name is Raja. I'm the founder and chief data scientist at Data Science Dojo. Prior to Data Science Dojo, I was Bing. And at Bing, I mean, so think of it this way. I like to introduce myself to people with that way. I'm old, right? So it's basically, I've been doing data science before it was called data science, right? So I mean, back in the day, early days in Bing, so, competing with Google, Hamza, where you are right now, right? So I mean, and prior to that, I have a PhD in computer science with a focus on similar stuff. Now they call it data science. At that time, just anything data mining, pattern recognition, machine learning, right? So those things. So, and that's pretty much it, I guess. Yeah.
So I think I'm gonna start with Francesca. How do you use generative AI or just I mean, it's becoming such a big term, right? Like there's generative AI, then there's AI, and then there's ML, and then there's data science. So I think in accumulation of that, and let's talk about the past 1 year advancements. If you take those into consideration, what are some of the most edgier use cases that you have in your everyday work?
So that is an excellent question, because it's true that we have been using generative AI now for a while, especially in this field that is applied data science and machine learning field. So usually I refer to three main categories that I see that applied every day in my work, and those are related to generating natural language, such as you can imagine summarizing complex text for different reading levels, but also suggesting alternative wording for different sentences. So these are some of the most used applications. The other category that I think is also pretty common is generating code, such as translating code from one programming language into another, identifying and troubleshooting bugs in code. This is very helpful, especially for data scientists that needs to deploy and operationalize their machine learning applications. And then the last one that probably is also one of the most popular one across the industry is about generating images. So you can, of course, for example, think about some examples related to generating the images for publications from text descriptions. And so this has been, I have to say, the three main categories where I have been seeing a lot of applications in this space. And of course, for people like me, and we work mainly, most of our work in AI, data science, machine learning space is done on the cloud. We also now have the possibility to access this type of scenarios and this type of technologies and capabilities on the cloud. So one, as a data scientist, of course, you find yourself on cloud and you have access, for example, to pre-train generative AI models, and then you can work on different customization capabilities. So this is more like the ability to fine-tune AI models with your own data. Then, of course, you can also use built-in tools to detect and also mitigate some biases, some unfair situations, dynamics that you can also see in your application. And so that is probably one of the most privileged situation where I find myself in, because again, accessing these tools has really been easier, I would say. I wouldn't say easy, but easier. And also sometimes just finding yourself on what we call the open AI studio, where you can build the AI models and deploy them at a very faster rhythm. That has been extremely helpful. So this has been more or less the general application of these AI, open AI capabilities in my everyday work.
Awesome. I'll move to the same question to Raja with a caveat. Raja, how much for this conference did you use the generative AI?
Okay, that's a good one. So actually, we are using, I mean, if you're referring to, I'm assuming you're referring to ChatGPT, right? So because the whole business of content creation, that has fundamentally changed. So we did actually, I mean, our communication, so spot checking, any issues in communication, rephrasing, rewording, absolutely. Then sometimes creating, maybe small snippets for our social media post. Yes, we are doing it. And then pretty much anything, but it's not really everything, because ChatGPT, for those of you who have been using it frequently, sometimes it will give you like totally, it's, I mean, for those of you who know how it works, right? It's essentially you're basically hopping from one word to another, right? So probabilistically speaking, and a few wrong jumps, it will take you in wrong direction, right? So essentially we have been using it, but with the caveat, I warn everyone, right? So I mean, so someone, I read this something very, I would say very insightful, that AI is not going to take your job away, right? It is some human using AI is going to take your job away, right? So if you look at it, it is just another tool, right? So, I mean, there are many tools that we take for granted now, right? So maybe Google, I mean, Stack Overflow, right? So we write code using Stack Overflow, right? So I think we look at it the same way, and we have used it quite a bit, to tell you the truth. Absolutely. It's a fabulous tool, as long as, I sometimes say, I mean, human intelligence should be used in conjunction with artificial intelligence. I mean, you cannot just simply use AI.
Awesome. Quickly moving on to Batul. Batul, how do you feel about the question, and what are some of the use cases for you?
Absolutely. So I'm writing a book and hoping to launch it in the next few months. And this book covers some of the popular machine learning algorithms. But the thing about this book is it's not a textbook. It's a fiction covering a lot of popular machine learning algorithm. And while writing this book, like up until like 2 years back, my biggest concern was about like hiring graphic designers and concept artists. So respectfully disagreeing that it's not going to take jobs away, but right now, so almost all the pictures that I am right now putting in my book are all AI generated, and the quality that I'm getting and the you know the independence, the freedom that you get, like, you know, every prompt you're tweaking here and there, and of course then you need to take you know, with a couple of paintbrushes, or obviously have to have some human touch to it. But I think this is like amazingly fascinating to be able to put such powerful tools in the hands of like scientists like me, who are like, we didn't spend a whole lot of time, like, you know, painting. A lot of us like me, like, you know, very left-brain people. Apart from that, like writing the book as an fiction itself, it's so apart from having like a personalized concept artist, you could always like, hey, ChatGPT, can you, whatever I wrote, can you make it a little bit more dramatic, or can you add more emotions to it?
Sure.
So it's also like having a personal assistant or a personal like editor along the way. And something that I also I found like extremely amazing is it's in the world of 3D animation. So I ran a very small YouTube channel where I used to teach like some of these architectures based on PowerPoints. So obviously the people who would want to learn about them, it was very helpful to them. But for majority of the people, it was absolutely boring, like PowerPoint. And thanks to open 3D softwares like Blender and all the AI plugins, like CGI plugins and whatnot, environmental creation plugins, thanks to AI that they're now using, a person like me who has no training when it comes to animation, has no training when it comes to video production, is actually able to launch her first 3D movie. So one person is able to do so many things. I mean, I think it's absolutely amazing. Like the amount, so the quality of 3D animation that were only like restricted to the studios like Disney or DreamWorks or Pixar can now actually, that level, that quality can actually now be produced by a person living in, so right now I'm living in my mom's basement, literally, and launching like a 3D movie. So I think thanks to AI, have been able to do so many things with so little training. So yeah, those are the three main things that I've been really using AI to help me through.
Awesome. And I think that sort of, you know, takes us to our next question. And I think, Batul, I'll sort of ask you to add more to it. So we all know about ChatGPT. We know about, you know, Stable Diffusion in one way or the other, or DALL-E. I think more specifically, people know DALL-E. People don't know what Stable Diffusion is. So is there anything else in generative AI that you would consider revolutionary or groundbreaking, quote unquote, the 3D videos, that people don't know of and don't understand the impact of?
Absolutely. I think more or less, so if you speak about a lot of sequence model, more like the architecture is the same. A lot of them are based on the same sequence-based like transform architecture. So for instance, music generation is one other thing. So one of the ways I would just like, a lot of my YouTube videos get demonetized because of using other people's music, and purchasing them is really expensive. So a lot of AI tools have come out to actually help you even compose your own music. And that was the same reason why I also started learning 3D animation, because using National Geography's 3D animation, for instance, can again get your video demonetized. So a lot of those things, and I think one of the things, it pretty much looks like whichever direction you look at. So for instance, motion capture. So, and one of the things which is really cool is that previously you had to hire like different actors and actresses to have different voices in the animation. Now you could literally have your own voice, or even like a text written, and AI can generate the voice of an old man, old woman, aggressive man, angry man, whatever emotion and character type you want. You could actually have your own movie created thanks to AI. So these are some of the very popular things I could think of at the top of my head, but I'm sure it's penetrating so fast that I feel that it has given so much power to one single person to be able to wear so many hats and create some really cool creative stuff.
Awesome. All right. So moving on to our next question, Francesca, this is a question for you. In the technology adoption lifecycle, is generative AI mainstream? Is it mainstream already, or do you think what are the steps that will let it to be mainstream? Where do you think it is in the life cycle of being introduced to the world?
That's an excellent question. So I do believe that we are still at the beginning for many different reasons. The first one that comes to my mind is probably because we still need that smoothless integration into some of the platform and tools that we use nowadays for machine learning and for building AI applications. So we are still at the beginning, but I do think that we can all use it and we can all get started with it. And I'm saying this because, as you know, right now there are many different companies that are working on integrating generative AI into their, and open AI into their platforms. And so, as you can see, like for example, I'm just thinking in terms of the generating natural language. I was mentioning that before, but also generating the codes, images as well. And if you think about generative AI, is just a subset of, I would say, of deep learning. So there is the big umbrella, as you all know, about artificial intelligence. Then there is machine learning, deep learning as a subset of machine learning, and inside deep learning there is generative AI. And so I do think that we do have all the tools that we need in order to use it. However, the integration into platforms that are going to give us the ability to build the end-to-end AI application is still a work in progress, in my opinion. Besides that, I would also say that there are, of course, a few models that are open source. Some other models, as you know, some other frameworks, you do need to be already on a specific cloud to get access to them and to start working and building your applications. But I do see a lot of application right now, also outside the tech industry. I'm just, thinking about manufacturing, healthcare, energy. I do see applications, marketing as well is another big one. I do see applications that are supporting all these different industries. And so going back to your original question, I do think that we are at the beginning, but this doesn't mean that there are just a few people that are using it and leveraging it in order to improve their own businesses.
Raja, I have a couple of questions for you. So let's start with the first one. How do you think generative AI is impacting creative work or work in general?
Probably some of the things have been addressed already, right? So as I said, and I still maintain that, by the way, Batul, because what I meant there was not that jobs will not disappear, but still it is someone who's good at leveraging these tools. They are going to actually they will do a better job, right? So that's and then internally, right? So our graphic design team, our video editing team, our content creation team, marketing team, it is a required skill for everyone, right? So they have to learn to use this because the speed at which things can be done, it is phenomenal. So in general, I think if you look at it, definitely the creative industry, the marketing industry, the graphic design, it still falls under creative. I mean, whether it's writing or graphic design or animation, or wherever these kind of things are involved, definitely, those industries and those roles are going to be impacted. We have a talk tomorrow, actually. So I have a friend who runs a startup based out of Pakistan, right? So LAM. And what they're doing is now, I mean, amazing stuff that they're doing. They are actually using generative AI to create photo shoots, right? So they have a marketplace for designers. And now, and the way the business model is that, they have smaller designers of South Asian clothing. And they would, so the smaller designers cannot hire very expensive models. And what are they supposed to do? Well, they are actually offering them. My friend Arif, he's ex-Facebook, right? So and he has worked at a few different places. So they are actually offering them generative AI tools. Right? The designers. I mean, imagine how. The regularly used or abused word democratization, right? So I mean, how accessible this technology is. I'm someone who has no idea about what technology is. All I have to do is, hey, I mean, I have this kind of apparel, this kind of dress, and then just I need a photo shoot, and then the tools actually are there for these people, empowering them, enabling them to actually generate synthetic photo shoots. So, I mean, I can keep going. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done, and as going back to the technology adoption lifecycle comment by Francesca, right? So I would say we have barely crossed the chasm, right? So, and now we'll start seeing all of these interesting ideas. The moment my friend mentioned to me, I said, wow, I mean, yeah, it is possible. And now you will see a lot of interesting ideas popping up all over, right? So people doing stuff that you would say, hey, I could have thought of it. I know generative AI, I could have thought of it. And but people will actually, they are going to build interesting startups around generative AI. So this is the time, if anyone is thinking.
All right. I think, Batul, this is a great segue to you. On a different side, what implication does the growth of generative AI have on traditional methods of data creation and dissemination? We've discussed the creative side of things. How do you think about the data creation part and the dissemination of that information?
So when you say, so as far as the question is concerned, when you say data creation and dissemination, you mean, could you elaborate a bit more, essentially?
Absolutely. So think about, I mean, there's just example of fake content.
I see.
Right. That is one example on one side of the things. The other side is, we have the marketing tools and all the things. How would you feel like you can talk about the positives also, and you can talk sort of cover some of the challenges and the opportunities over there also.
Absolutely. So in terms of fake data, fake news, fake contents, I think this is certainly not new in the human world. I mean, we humans have been doing it like forever, especially, I mean, yes, there's a lot of concern for the right reasons. What if AI comes in and, generate all sorts of fake stuff or even biased information, right, which is highly polarized and whatnot. But literally, if we were really so concerned about it, I think when it comes to history, the entire history has been really distorted by humans, all the news channels. All of us are really biased to one extent. So one of the things I am really in favor of technology, the only part that I'm worried is the training data that gets fed to it. And as far as we're able to come up to a consensus on that, I think the technology itself, I think I'm pretty positive about it. And as far as the detection of, obviously, it might be so that these models are becoming so and so better. The tools are becoming so good that there might be a time that it's going to be like really difficult to tell whether this is something that has been generated by AI or has this thing been generated by an actual, or is this something that's actually real, especially when it comes to fake videos and actual videos. And I think this leads to even more opportunities when it comes to detection itself. It's just like computer virus. We had virus coming in, and then we had a whole set of industry established around creating antiviruses. So I think these things are going to pop up, and then we're going to have more opportunities provided and consumed by other set of industries around those, such as deepfake detection or what's real, what's not real. So essentially, when I look at implications, I think this is one thing, and a lot more things are going to come up, but we're going to figure a way out, as we've already done. Obviously, it's much better to be careful and definitely plan ahead. But I do personally believe we tend to get slightly more negative when it comes to technology, even though us as humans have been doing the same thing for the longest time ever. So,
yeah, absolutely. All right, shifting gears a little bit, Francesca, how do you think we can make sure that generative AI is developed and used in a way that truly benefits society as a whole?
Okay, so yeah, this is another pretty good question. I would say that every time that as a data scientist I work with generative AI, I try to consider, of course, the ethical implication of working with any AI system, honestly, not just when you work with generative AI. And so one thing that I try to do is more like I have checklist of principles that, of course, are extremely important to follow. Some of those principles are more like industry standards that have been developed by tech companies like Microsoft, Google, etc. And so those principles are fairness, of course, always make sure that AI systems shouldn't make decisions that are discriminating against or supporting bias of a specific group of people or a specific user. Then there is a reliability and safety, also privacy and security, inclusiveness, accountability is another one, and finally transparency. This is just a list of principles that I always try to keep in mind every time that I build the AI application. And I totally agree with the panelists today in this conference that, of course, you need to start with data. Data is the first place where you can check for those principles in this case. But I also think that principles probably are not enough, are good to keep in mind. As I said, it's a list I always check with myself, with my teams when we build those applications, but are not enough. So there are, of course, some tools that you can leverage every time that you start building applications, especially using generative AI. And most of those tools are actually open source. So there is no excuse to not learn how to use it or to not leverage those tools, I would say, in your applications. I'm referring to InterpretML. It's just one of the many tools that I have been using. It's a Python-based toolkit in Python-based toolkit that you can use in order to understand better the impact of your data into predictions so that your or the results that your application is generating. There are other tools such as Fairness and Fair AI. That is another tool that helps you on the data understanding and also on the data exploration part. So those are general toolkits that, of course, data scientists, in my opinion, should use and should include, integrate in their everyday work, especially when they are leveraging technologies such as OpenAI and generative AI. The other thing that I think is important to mention is that, of course, OpenAI and most importantly, generative AI is, I think there are a lot of benefits. Some of those benefits that can benefit the entire society have been already shared in this panel. I can think about, for example, also the improvement of content quality, because AI-generated content can be of higher quality than content that are, for example, created by humans, and also in terms of content quality and variety, and also in terms of personalized content. So all these are just some simple application of generative AI that you can see every day when you are looking, for example, for a set of news or for certain articles that you need to read for your everyday job. I do think that there is a lot of improvement that can be done there in terms of the quality, the variety, and again, the personalization of the content that you want to digest, that you want to read, but most importantly, how this content can follow those principles in order to make sure that we have content that is actually accelerating some of the processes and is enable people to understand better our society and a few dynamics in our world. So yeah, these I'm trying to be optimistic and again positive. I think these are some of the benefits that I do see there. I do see them already applied, and I think that are just very positive benefits for our society.
Awesome.
So, thank you, Francesca. If you allow me to interject just for a moment to contextualize all of this. So I think Francesca gave a very comprehensive answer here. So to simplify things a little bit, if you look at the entire the machine learning life cycle, a model life cycle, you start with data collection, pre-processing, and model building, and you perhaps tuning model parameters, and then it comes to prediction and interpretation, right? If you look at this, it is more human. Humans are involved in pretty much all stages, except when the model is, maybe the model is being built. Other than that, I think there is, just like other disciplines, doctors have something called a Hippocratic oath, right? So they take that oath, certain code of conduct for a specific discipline, right? I think the same goes with modelers. I mean, they need to understand that there are implications of what they're doing when they're gathering data and, all the way, right? So sometimes, I mean, you see applications like granting parole based on an AI model. I mean, I've been doing this for more than half of my life, right? But I would not actually grant people parole based on AI models. I mean, some will disagree possibly with me, but I mean, this is once you have seen models, how they work, you would not do it. What if there's a false positive, false negative, right? So all of that. So in most cases, we have to look at AI as more of a decision support system. This is my take. In most cases, I would like AI to be used as a decision support system and not something completely autonomous. If you look at as a human, right? So as a technologist, certain things are absolutely fascinating. But at the end of the day, as a human being, as a citizen of this world, I would like it to be more in a decision assistance context than just completely autonomous. So just a few thoughts on this.
Awesome. Batul, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so it's a very philosophical discussion actually to me, because we are training like all these models on all the data that has been generated by humans. So essentially it's more like us if we just let it wander through all the data. And on the other hand, we don't want to be like us because we think a lot of data that we generate can be toxic, can be racist, can be whatnot. So, and then who is going to decide like what is ethical, what is not ethical, what is toxic, what is not toxic? Because those things are also like they vary throughout the world. And right now, I feel like since most of these models are being trained and generated in the US, so it's very like I think Western, should I say Silicon Valley specific, like who's to decide what's ethical and what's not ethical. So I think it's a very interesting question. And I think this is something that probably should really requires like a global debate and consortium kind of in kind of fashion where we're building different cultures together, different walks of life, and it's something that's not just especially when it comes to training data. Obviously technology and algorithms, those are universal, anybody can use them, but when it comes to data, how exactly do we filter it through what's ethical, what's not ethical? I think it's very interesting, and it's also even more interesting that at this day and age now, it's really exciting that we're actually trying to come together. Okay, how exactly do we train all these models and what comes out of it? So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Awesome. You know what? I'm going to chime in here. I'm going to break the rule of a moderator. There's a very nice book called The Big Nine. There was a recent Netflix show about that also, related to that. So the Big Nine sort of discusses how initial models were made and the people in the room who built that training data, who were they? And it described what Batul sort of mentioned is that it's very Western, very Silicon Valley. So in the 60s, you can imagine a set of middle-aged white men sitting and, all PhDs. And they had a mindset which was not represent everyone, but that's what they knew. And an example of that was the MIT data set, the ImageNet, that sort of came up, and it had those issues and it was identified later, we should drop it. So I would suggest everyone to read the book, the Big Nine. It just gives you a very good preview of what happened and what could potentially happen in the future, with a very good future, a medium, and a sort of like a bad future in that front. All right, Raja, question for you. You've been in this field. You've been in the field of educating people for such a long time. You have such a widespread. In that realm, what excites you and what scares you with respect to the students that you teach and you interact with, mostly on the platform or in person? What are some of the challenges that this generative AI brings in for you that you feel strongly about and sort of affects you?
I see all these tools as a natural progression, right? So when Wikipedia came in, so hey, people are going to, kids are going to copy over like a Wikipedia article and submit it, right? So, and then we worked around that, right? So, and even before that, right? So, you know, maybe around the same time. I mean, when web happened, Google happened, right? Search engines. So researching articles is it's quite easy. Sometimes you copy, and then the educators, they have found workarounds for sure, right? So it has been happening. And I actually think that educators have to embrace this. I mean, even if they don't want to, they don't have a choice, right? So they have to embrace it because it is here to stay. I found this very interesting post somewhere. Some history teacher actually, he flipped, or he or she had, they flipped it. They generated some article on some historical topic using ChatGPT and asked the students, hey, can you point out the flaws or mistakes in this, right? So that's a creative way of using it. And I think it's probably much more thought-provoking. Hey, write an essay on, you know, the Civil War versus here is an essay on Civil War, just go and fix it, right? So how would you correct it, right? So I think since we are in early stages, we don't know how the educators are going to respond to this, but we have started seeing the responses, they are happening. So we see all the, you know, all of those things, right? So I'm sure some of you have seen that a high schooler said that they scored 100% on their English exam, and then they were bragging about the Reddit post also being generated by the ChatGPT. So they were actually bragging about this, right? So things like this would happen, but eventually, I think educators are going to catch up, right? So this is how technology progresses. I mean, we have seen this throughout civilization.
So just very quickly adding on to what Raja said, I think ChatGPT recently passed SAT exam, if I recall reading the news right. And then an educator was making a comment that tells more about our exam as compared to the tool itself. Like if it's based on just pattern recognition and broad memorization, then, I mean, these tools are also, I think, exposing the sort of examinations that we have in our education system and how a lot of them are lacking creativity to such a great extent. So ChatGPT passing SAT exams, or there were other couple of exams that it did pass, really exposes a lot of those flaws. So just wanted to add that there.
And I don't know, I never verified this, but I've seen about an MBA being completed by ChatGPT. I don't know what that means, but I've seen these kind of things.
All right, Francesca, question for you. Can you tell us about some of the exciting ways you see generative AI being used to tackle important problems in the field like healthcare and energy?
Yes, I can say that especially in healthcare, I think I have been reading a few articles where I see generative AI can be used to, for example, create new medical images such as X-rays or MRIs, and also in order to generate personalized treatment plans based on a patient medical history or also other factors. So I do think there are a lot of benefits that we can see in healthcare. Some of them, this article was also mentioning that some of them were, for example, in terms of how we can streamline drug discovery and development, because the generative AI can help speed up the process of drug discovery and development, also by identifying potential drug candidates and also testing their effectiveness without testing, those on for example, clinical trials or animals or humans. So that is, in my opinion, a huge benefit that we can observe right now. Another one still in healthcare is about personalized medicine. As you know, generative AI algorithms can help create these sort of personalized and customized treatment plans for patients, because they can take into account all the patient's medical history, symptoms, and many other factors. And finally, I think one of the other benefits that we can see in the healthcare industry is about, I probably already mentioned this, but I think it's one of the greatest benefit is the fact that we can improve medical imaging. So generative AI can help improve the accuracy and also the efficiency of using machine learning in combination with medical imaging technique. And of course, these type of new techniques can also help identify abnormal image and alert doctors about the potential issues, and that can be done most of the time, in a faster way. And so, of course, prevention is probably the key in these cases. And so, I do see a lot of very good cases, and I have been reading about them a lot, especially in the healthcare sectors. The same I have to say for the energy. As you know, especially when it gets to renewable energy, there is a lot of applications that are coming from the machine learning field. I'm thinking about energy forecasting, but also grid operations and optimizations, also the coordination of distributed energy across different assets and different sites across different geographies. So that can be, of course, some of the fields where I think generative AI has been applied a lot. And also, finally, when I think about the energy industry, also the development of new materials and also how we can use these new materials that are better and more resistant, especially in terms of how they can resist specific type of weather. So that is another great area, in my opinion, for generative AI. But I have to say the healthcare sector probably is the one that, more than the energy sector, where I already see the applications and I already see the benefit that we can all get from generative AI. So yeah, this is just some of the readings and articles that I have been looking at, and some of the applications that I actually saw, especially in the healthcare sector.
Thank you for that. What is the role of the government in regulating the use of generative AI to create content?
Okay, I don't know, maybe I'm really capitalist. I really don't believe in a whole lot of regulations. But I definitely believe when it comes to the regulation part that I really would want to see is preventing monopolies from happening. So I don't know during this 1 year what happened in terms, but at least 1 year back when they did release GPT-3, the weights were not released. And you could not, even though it was like OpenAI started as OpenAI. And so it can be very hard for new startups to compete against giants such as Google, for instance, even if another like startup can have better algorithms and whatnot. But since the data monopoly is so much, it's really hard to compete in that space. And so I would definitely want the government at least to intervene as such and fund a lot of open source projects. And even to add to it, I was recently reading one of Facebook posts. They released something they called open source, but it's only free to use if you're using it for like nonprofit. As soon as you start building a startup of it and start making money, then again, it's Facebook's property, Meta's property. So yes, I would say these open source models are really not open source. If the government could help in getting these weights out, and if not, at least funding the companies that are actually trying to create a platform which is freer for startups and even individuals to use, like Hugging Face and a lot of other budding projects that are coming up. I think that is where we could really help a lot. Kind of like democratize the data and not let it be in the hands of a few giants, and that's it. So that would be my take on that.
Absolutely. I think there's not just the tech, like the data, it's the compute engine that you need to put it all together. And
Yes.
a company that owns the cloud infrastructure, they get to build it. So Microsoft, Facebook, Google, for that matter, they own the infrastructure to run these models at scale and produce those. Like, I think you can end up getting the data set yourself, but it's just the fact that there's so much compute that is needed with the, we are reaching 1 trillion parameters. It's just a AI war, like an arms race. Yeah, AI arms race. Raja, what are your thoughts on this?
I think pretty much the control that government would do would demonstrate in any other space. It's more about legislation, about what constitutes as fair use. For a financial services company, right? For banks, I mean, we are so far ahead in civilization, we don't even know. But what what constitutes as a fair interest rate, right? So, and what would be the terms of service, right? So I don't know how many of you know, but there is something called AI Bill of Rights that exists within the US. The European Union, they took the lead on this, and they came up with some sort of hierarchy. It's more like a pyramid. You start at the bottom of the pyramid is applications that they call minimal risk, right? So my email spam filter, any use of AI in video gaming, that's the minimal risk category. Then there is chatbots and deepfakes and emotion recognition systems. They call them limited risk. And all the way now, high risk is when you're deciding whether I'm creditworthy or not, and you start using my race or any other factor that can go against me that I have no control over, right? And all the way, some certain things that are prohibited, like social scoring. It is happening in some countries as we speak. And also, I mean, governments, they will act in accordance with how the society and the general culture in that maybe in that group of people, in that region, whatever people are comfortable with. I mean, governments actually will make laws accordingly, right? Certain things that I perceive to be okay in this part of the world may not be okay in a very different part of the world, right? So I think legislation is going to be needed, not on definitely monopoly and all of those those regulations are needed, but it's more about what's fair use and what use should be prohibited. I think that's how I look at it.
Awesome. Francesca, what are your thoughts?
Yes, so I do agree, with everything that was shared so far. I do believe in the democratization of course, as you said, the compute, the data, and also I would say to add to that also democratization in terms of the education of these fields of science and application, because I do think that we or at least I feel in a very privileged position. I am in the United States. I do have access to very good education, work environment, but what about the rest of the world? If we can put together some standards that are, of course, looking at the democratization of compute, data, regulation for sure, but also at getting access to good education for everybody since really early stages of education. I'm really thinking about elementary school, and get those people closer to the AI world in general and how they can at least understand this application as a final consumers and as a final users. I think we can really reach the good potential of AI, generative AI, and so on. And of course, if these people then can be also they can also learn how to build these applications. But I don't think that developers and data scientists are the only roles out there that are going to interact with AI. And so different type of roles and disciplines should really be included in different curriculum at the education level. And I do think we should make sure that that type of education, that type of quality in terms of content is open to students across the world. That is, my hope for the future, and I really believe in that.
I'm so pleased to see there's so many different we are, I think internally Google is thinking about introducing generative text and images within our docs and slides. Notion is already doing that externally, so we're starting to see usage pattern, and I feel like we'll only get better. And it's actually how good we become with that tool, how good we are able to utilize it for ourselves. With that, we're at the end of the questions that I have for the panel.
There is a question by Mashood Alam. What are the implications on legal realm where video and audio recordings are used as evidence?
Any takers on that?
Actually, yeah, I mean, it's an extremely interesting question. And okay, maybe I gave a very sweeping statement. I would actually like to say that I don't believe in a whole lot of regulations. The reason why I said that is because the government throughout the world, like bureaucracy in general is really slow. And the advancements that are taking place in AI are very fast and they're changing a lot. So how do you even build like legislations around it? So now just as this example, like what if somebody uses my voice? Like how do I even give as an evidence? And same goes with videos, right? People could literally, and in the future it's going to be so realistic, it's going to be very hard. So I believe that the only way forward is even better technology to go against it. So as I think I mentioned as a starter, like, we have viruses and then we have more industry coming in as antiviruses. But even to add to that, something that was very interesting is because diffusion models, they use like a lot of prompts, right? So generate me for instance, generate me an image inspired by this artist. So there was a lot of discussion going on. Can those artists actually sue you because you used their name in the prompt and you actually generated work that was inspired by them? So and that again comes to even a bigger question. So you are suing because the name of the artist was used as an inspiration, but artists, that's what art is. We get inspired and we generate something of our own. So it gets like so like complicated and it's so new, and then there's so many questions and every question leads to even further questions. I think it's extremely interesting, and governments will really have to act very fast. Like it's the speed is so high that again I would really leave it open-ended. I'm really not sure like how will they be able to catch up so fast, come up with like every single day literally we're getting like bombarded with so many new questions when these new technologies are coming up at such a fast pace and so many users, as you just mentioned, 1 billion users in I think 1 week or something like that. So how are we going to catch up with the phase with this fast pace? Like, I think it's very interesting.
I recently read a question on Reddit that somebody had asked a question on Reddit that how do we solve homelessness? And somebody said, complex problems do not have simple answers. Do not expect an answer. Like there is no simple answer to that. And this is a very complicated and nuanced, and we need to have an open discussion with representation and a method to solve this, to get to a point where we can all agree that this makes sense. And I mean, of course, it will upset someone, but we need to get to a point which is fair, and that requires representation of different group of people. And I think that's where the win will be. I'm going to quickly move to the next question. How can we new data scientists cope with FOMO, fear of missing out, in the era of generative AI? Francesca, do you want to take that?
Yes, I want to take that. I read that question and I find it actually funny, but very, very realistic, because I also have that feeling every single day. When I wake up, I like to read a few articles, news related to tech and AI, and it's always very fascinating. So my suggestion for you is take time to read new things every single day. And I know that this can sound like more like a cliche type of advice, but it's true. Like at least I try to take 1 hour every morning to do a few readings. And sometimes it can be just news from the tech or finance sector. Some other times it can be a couple of scientific articles. Some other times can be a book. But really, really invest in reading or listening every single day. Podcast is another option that you have. The other thing is really attending conferences like this one, being involved in the community, not just as a person that is learning from others, that is great, but after a while also as a person that is giving back to the community. And we all have something to share and to give others. It can be, a presentation for people who wants to get started in data science. It can be a super technical presentation on a deep learning algorithm that you want to apply to a specific industry. So anything that you think is important for you, for your work, and you want to share with the community, also that is going to be extremely important. So be active in the community, attend this type of conferences, and then really invest in your learning. That is the way to make sure that you are up. And no worries, we are all on the same boat. So I also have this feeling every single day.
All right. I think we have one more question. What was the name of the animation tool that Batul recommended?
It's called Blender, BLENDER. It's an open source, completely free animation tool. And kind of to add to that, to the just the response, the awesome response you gave. Yes, the FOMO is there, but the good thing is that a lot of it is actually even coming in. So I would say YouTube. YouTube has like so much amazing stuff that is coming in, everyday blogs. That yes, I think when I started data science, a lot was obviously the speed was not this like what is right now, that is literally, it feels like a fire hose kind of situation. But then there was not a whole lot of material to even self-learn. But now we have so many new courses coming in, Udemy, YouTube, all these different things. So even if you're missing out, you can always catch up because so much more new material, teaching content is actually coming in. So, and yes, Blender, the tool I mentioned, also self-taught thanks to YouTube. So yeah, it's a fun time to be alive. There's so much out there, and you can just literally learn everything on your own. So you don't even need to go to fancy schools like Stanford that I went to, or any of the fancy schools. Literally, you could be anywhere and you can learn anything online and can be very good at it. So
I think just gonna say plus one to that. There is one YouTube channel that I love, and I wish it was there when I was a student. That's called StatQuest. George Stammer. He has revolutionized the way he teaches, and it's just so amazing to study from him. And so I'm a professor. I'm a young professor. I assign my students to watch those videos before the class, so that they can sort of get an understanding of what we're asking and what those things are. So it's a game changer because previously we would be afraid of all the nomenclature and the linear algebra that would come our way. Raja, do you want to add something to that? I know Data Science Dojo is built on the infrastructure of helping and teaching. So do you want to add more to this?
I think learning is, you have to take it a day at a time. I mean, so all of us, we get anxious, all of us. So for instance, I'm not ashamed to admit that. I mean, generative AI is not something that I know very well, right? So, and all of us, we are actually at some point in time, we are constantly learning, right? So, and basically when you're learning anything, becoming an expert, if you ever become an expert, I think it's a journey. I mean, and you will continue to learn. Some people, they would get into the generative AI bandwagon before even getting fundamentals of, basic data analysis and understanding of bias, what could go wrong with data. And that is actually, I don't recommend people. And to give you an idea, the bootcamp that we have taught for years, like close to 8,000 people now, we don't teach deep learning in that bootcamp. We teach fundamentals. We teach the very bare fundamentals, what could go wrong, how do you evaluate a model, how do you build a model, different types of models, and how do you take care of bias in data and all of that, right? So, because there is some fundamentals that are absolutely needed before you even go there, because if you go to generative AI prematurely, you probably don't know the consequences of what a bad model can do to your customer, to your business, to the society. So yeah, I mean, it is, you should not have this fear of missing out. Just keep learning and eventually you get there.
Yeah, I think one more great way of not having the FOMO is to try to open a YouTube channel. Don't think that you have a lot of audience, but just try to re-explain what you've learned. And when you reflect, I think the art of reflecting has just changed. It just changes the game. And we absorb so much information on a daily basis that we tend not to reflect on life itself. We don't reflect on what we've learned. We just try to keep going. And then, an example of that is that we are so hooked on Google Maps that just to go from point A to point B, we'll just open up Google Maps, and it's easier. In most scenarios, we tend not to remember the route. We just say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to use Google Maps, and then that should be fine for me.
I mean, we are living in this generation where, these tools are making us more enabled and empowered, I would say. But in some ways, there is some downside to it as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. This is the end of our session here. This has been great. Francesca, Raja, and Batul, thank you so much for your time.